All right, good morning, everybody. I was asking myself if I should be really upbeat, but it's like the day after the party, so I'm going to be probably pretty chill this morning. But my name is Adam Seagar. I'm your session host from Jamf. But here to introduce John Britton, who will be coming up here shortly, to Workbrew, how to unite developers, IT administrators, and security professionals. Should you need anything during the session, I'll just be in the back corner. But John, you can take it away from here, and we'll get started.
Thank you.
Hope everybody had fun last night.
I don't need, I have a, yeah. Hi folks, good morning. Thanks for coming. So today we're going to be talking about Workbrew, how to unite developers, IT administrators, and security professionals. The concept of this talk came from the idea that, as we went out and talked to people about how they're using Homebrew in industry, we found three distinct audiences. And the developers who love Homebrew and use it every day, the IT admins who have to manage it, and the security folks who are scared of it. And as I talked to these people over and over, I learned, they all have the right intentions. The security folks just want to keep everyone safe. The IT people, want to give the developers the tools they need to do their jobs. And the developers, they just want to be unblocked. So hopefully, learning a little bit about Workbrew, we can help you with a tool that will help you, deliver a great experience for your developers while keeping your company safe and keeping your jobs not too much extra work for you. So my name is John Britton. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Workbrew. Just a little bit of background on me. I'm a software engineer. I spent a lot of time working on developer tools over my career, and I live in Western Massachusetts, and I love working on developer tools. So the agenda for today. First, we'll talk about Homebrew. What is Homebrew? Why is it important? Who's using it? And then next, we'll talk about the reasons why we say no to Homebrew. I talked to a lot of companies where Homebrew is officially not allowed. And there's a few different reasons why, so we'll talk about that. And then how Workbrew can help. Then we'll talk a little bit about advanced Workbrew, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So number one, Homebrew. What is Homebrew? Simply put, Homebrew is the #1 app store for developers. It's open source. There's a huge community of developers that maintain it. And it's an industry standard tool with over 15 years of history. It looks something like this. You open up your terminal, you type in the command brew, install, and then the name of the thing that you want to install, and magically it appears on your machine. Developers love this. It makes it really, really easy for them to get up and running in any environment working on any different project. It includes everything under the sun. Things like open source programming languages, IDEs, libraries. It even has closed source desktop applications. So anything you could put in your applications folder, you can install via Homebrew, drivers. A little known fact about Homebrew is that you can also use it to distribute internal software. So you can create your own packages and push them out to your team with like CLIs or for data analytics or internal tools. Homebrew is everywhere. This is an estimated number, but it's about 35 million devices with Homebrew installed. It's trusted by tens of millions of developers. And in effect, it's the default package manager for macOS. If you look at other operating systems like Linux, if you look at Ubuntu, they all have their own built-in package managers. Homebrew is different from other kind of language-specific package managers. You might have heard of like NPM, or Go has its own language package manager. Homebrew is different in that it's installing stuff on your machine at the operating system level. It's giving you all of the utilities used across your entire workflow. And it's so popular that at WWDC, when Apple got up on stage and announced the M1 Apple Silicon chips, one of the first things that they said after that was Homebrew is supported from day one. So it's a very, very popular and important piece of infrastructure for developers on macOS. It's also multi-platform. So you can run Brew on Linux. We have a product called Linux Brew. It gives you the same kind of experience of installing packages, but on Linux. And it also works under WSL on Windows. So if you have a mixed environment and people using this across different platforms, you can see it's worked there. But there are a few problems. And these are the ones that come up over and over again. So first of all, Homebrew is built to be a single-player solution. It's meant for a developer to get their machine, install it on one device, configure it themselves, and then do whatever they want. That leads to another problem where there's no visibility in your company. This is the #1 thing I hear from people. I'm afraid of Homebrew because I have no idea what's going on my devices. So with Homebrew, there's no visibility. You can't see what's happening on each individual device. And then lastly, there's kind of no guardrails. It's totally a free-for-all. You can do whatever you want. This is great when you're an individual developer working on your own machine, but in an enterprise environment, this is just not acceptable. It's not that Homebrew is insecure, but as you add more and more devices into your network, into your environment, the problems become more complicated, and you need a way to standard way to manage all of this. So what can you do? Well, there are a few strategies that I've seen out in the wild, and these are a few of them. First is do nothing. Just ignore it. We don't officially support it, but we also don't disallow it. And this is probably where 80% of companies are. It's in your environment, I guarantee it. If you have a Mac fleet and you have developers, you have Homebrew, even if you don't know about it. The second is informed trust, and this is a little bit better, and I'd say maybe 15% of people are in this camp. You have a documentation about what Homebrew is, how to use it responsibly, things that you're allowed to install. I've even met Homebrew, users of Homebrew that have documented processes for getting packages approved, and the entire team follows those processes, but there's no enforcement of those policies. It's just best effort. When you want to add something to the environment, you need to get security sign-off, and then you can install it. But if you don't ask, you can still do it anyways. And then lastly, 5% of companies, the biggest companies out there that have the most budget, the most capable teams, and high sophistication will roll their own solution. I won't name any names, but there are several very large enterprise companies that I'm sure you all know that have entire teams and their organizations dedicated to supporting Homebrew. They've forked Homebrew, they've made their own policies, built it into that, and it's just not really sustainable for most companies to do that. So let's talk about why we say no to Homebrew. So across the different kind of personas, there are a few reasons why each of these types of people will say no to Homebrew. The first is administrative burden. How many of you have users that come to you and request packages and you have to package them for them? Yeah. This is not sustainable for 15,000 packages to give your developers the ability to have, to be innovative. If some new package comes out next week and you've never heard of it before, how do you know if they should have it or not? So it's just not really possible. Patching and upgrading is difficult. It's not integrated. There's no way to filter things. On the security side, there's potentially unfiltered or unverified sources. So in Homebrew, we have a feature called taps. A tap is a repository that contains many packages. Officially, there are a couple main taps, Homebrew Core and Homebrew Casks, that contain most of what people think of as Homebrew. But you can actually go create your own tap and put your own packages in it, and anyone can do that, and your users can go and install those packages. So you don't know where things are coming from in Homebrew unless you're able to limit which taps they're using. Another security vulnerability or security concern is that many people come to me and they ask about admin versus standard users. Now, I won't give you advice on whether your users should be standard or admin, have sudo rights or not. I'm a developer, I want sudo access on my machine, and you're not gonna take it away from me. But in a bank, if you have some kind of regulations that say you have to do X, Y, and Z every 5 days and check that these things are not installed, you might not be able to give your users admin privileges. And Homebrew, it's kind of difficult to use Homebrew without admin privileges for some things. So this is another reason why, hey, we can't give you admin, so we can't really let you use Homebrew. We also don't have any way to block packages. And then lastly, on the risk and compliance side, you might have frameworks that you need to meet. You need insights, you need data on are we meeting the standards of these frameworks. You might actually need support. So these are all different reasons why we would say no to Homebrew in a work context. This is just an example of one real-world exploit targeting the Homebrew project. Now, this is not a case where Homebrew was compromised, let me be clear. But there are bad actors out there that will go and buy Google ads and impersonate Homebrew. So when you go to Google and you type in Homebrew to search for the installer, you'll get this link that looks official. But in reality, it takes you to not the official Homebrew installation, and it will install malware. And this is a big problem. You need to have a standard place that your developers get this stuff. And as IT admins, you can provide that to them with a standard deployment. So how can we help? So I'm going to talk a lot about what Workbrew is, how you can use it to solve some of these problems, and then towards the end, we'll have some time for questions. So Workbrew is enterprise-ready Homebrew. loved by developers and approved by security. And at the high level, it lets you deploy, manage, and secure Brew across your entire fleet. It works something like this. You have an installer, a PKG file, that's integrated with your MDM. Most of you are probably using Jamf. We have, you can create a Jamf policy. You can give it to your developers in self-service. They click a button, Workbrew's installed. Once it's installed on their device, you have access to the Workbrew Secure CLI. It's a wrapper around Homebrew that ensures that the way Brew is used is only within the guardrails that are configured in your environment. So you might have some packages that are not allowed. They won't be able to install them. But also, it gives you the ability to do things like use Brew as a standard user on the device. Once you have Brew installed on their device, on a regular basis, it checks in, sends metadata about installed packages, version numbers, and then you have a web interface where you can manage all of those devices. So let's talk about deployment. From Jamf, you can load up your PKG, install it onto any number of devices, or make it available via self-service. Our standard installer gives you a way to do zero-touch deployment. So if you have DEP provisioning, you buy a device with Apple Business Manager, it comes online the first time, connects to Jamf, Workbrew's installed, and then Workbrew also gives you the ability to set default packages. So there's a baseline of installed software, automatically appears on the device on day one. This is great for new devices, but what about those hundreds of devices you have out there already with Brew installed? Well, you can push the same installer out to those devices, and they'll be seamlessly upgraded to Workbrew. All their packages stay in place, nothing changes, it's non-disruptive to your end users, but you gain insight and visibility into how things are being used. On the analytics and observability front, you get information on every single package that's installed on the device, what versions are installed, when they were installed, why they were installed, information about dependencies, everything that you could imagine on what's happening in the environment. Now, everything I've talked about so far, the deployment, the ability to use standard users, the visibility, observability, the ability to set up default packages is part of Workbrew on our free plan. So you can go and install this and use this, and I hope that all of you do. Unlimited users, unlimited devices. Now, where we get into additional kind of management and security compliance functionality. Remote management, what you can do with Workbrew is run any brew command across any subset of devices. So that's things like, let me install a package for you, uninstall a package that's not permitted, run an upgrade or patch something. You can also do things like pinning versions. You can say, I want this package to stay at version X and not be upgraded unless I specifically ask for that upgrade. With our remote management features, you can also create device groups. So you can specify, maybe engineers as one group, data science as another group, maybe IT users or admin users. And for each of those groups, you can specify different policies. Things like which packages should be installed by default, which package are they allowed to use, and so on. And then lastly is security and compliance. The number one feature that we hear from folks on the security front is how do I manage my vulnerabilities? We'll scan every device in your network or in your environment, cross-check it against all the versions of the packages that are installed with known vulnerabilities, and we'll alert you about them. Those alerts will come in via email, Slack, webhooks, or via our UI in the console, and you have one-click remediation. So click a button, and all of those devices are patched. It's been a while now since the XZ vulnerability, but you probably remember that. We had lots of customers coming in and saying, hey, how do I fix this? And we could show them in one click, 5-10 minutes, all 100, 200, 300 devices were patched. Very easy. So let's talk a little bit deeper about some of the functionality of Workbrew. Access controls. So under the hood, the way that this thing works is you have Homebrew as the foundation on your device, and then you have Workbrew as a wrapper around the Homebrew command line. So your developers, they're in their terminals, they're typing brew install, brew services, whatever they want to do, and you have the ability to set guardrails. So for example, I usually use the VPN example. A lot of my customers are highly regulated industries, and they say, we can't have VPN software on our devices because of data exfiltration. So you can go and you create a policy, you say block these VPN tools. What happens when a developer tries to install one of those tools? Well, you can set up a configuration here that shows them what to do. Who's in charge of this thing and where do they go to get help? So in here it just says contact us on the security Slack channel. This is one of the ways that you can give your developers an escalation path when things are different than how they work in Homebrew. You also have role-based access control. So you can add all the admin users to Workbrew and give them the ability to just read what's in there. So if you have auditors or people involved in doing your compliance, maybe you're doing SOC 2 or ISO standards, they need data, they need to go in and take screenshots. But you can also give people admin or other levels of access. Additionally, you can set up blocking to just one domain. We work with every major MDM, especially including Jamf. One of the things that we do when we integrate with our MDM providers is pull in device groups. So rather than giving you another tool that you need to manage and enter all this data and set your devices up, we can pull all of that data right from your MDM. Another thing that's nice about this is that with the device group syncing, you can set up policies tied to individual groups. And when people join or leave groups, those policies will automatically apply. So for example, let's say you have a team called engineers. You have a bunch of dependencies that are installed for them. When a new joiner joins your company and you add them to that engineers group, automatically all those packages will be installed for them. So let's look a little bit at fleet health. So when there's an event in Workbrew, you'll get notifications. This is showing Slack notifications. You can get these same notifications via webhook. So if you use Teams or whatever, you can send them to Teams. But it will show you whenever an event happens in your environment. So here you can see a new CVE was found. There's a CVE in Pillow, and it was detected on one device, and you have one click to upgrade. Now, in my case, I have automatic vulnerability patching turned on, so the next notification I got was that a brew command was created, and this is going to be patched. So it's really, really easy to use. We also have visibility into what's out of policy. So we call these violations. There are different kinds of policies. In this case, what you can see is we have an expectation that this user is supposed to be an admin, and we're reporting that they are not having that access. So we can go into Jamf, we can adjust their group membership, and give them the access that they're supposed to have. Similarly, if someone installs a package that's not allowed, we'll show you a violation. We'll give you an alert and tell you about that. You might ask, why would they be able to install a package that's not allowed? Isn't that against the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing? Well, if you have existing Homebrew users and you're converting them into using Workbrew, they have hundreds, thousands of packages installed. When you upgrade them, those packages stay in place. So this is a way that you can deploy Workbrew without interrupting the developer flow and slowly chip away at things that are out of policy and try to improve your security and compliance posture. Let's talk about supply chain as well. So I mentioned a little bit earlier about taps. So with Workbrew, you can actually set up a policy around what taps are allowed or not allowed. So if you go into the interface, you click Allowed Taps, it'll automatically make the official Homebrew taps part of your environment, and then give you the ability to search for new taps that your developers might need and allow those in there. You can also include your own private taps that you've created in here as well. So the way that private taps work today is with GitHub integration. You can go and attach Workbrew to your GitHub account. We'll find all the repositories in there that contain Homebrew taps, and we'll make those immediately available to all of the developers in your organization. We have upcoming, maybe next week, general Git support, so you can use GitLab or other providers as well. I want to talk a little bit about the supply chain of these packages. Where do they come from? Who's in charge of them? And then how can we trust them? So there's two types of packages in Homebrew. One is called a formula, which is a source code-based package, and it's things like programming languages, libraries, OpenSSL, Ruby, Golang, Python. And then we have another type of package called a Cask. Those are binary-based packages. And these two different types of packages exist because some of the software that we provide via Homebrew and via Workbrew is provided by the vendor as a binary, and some of it's provided by the vendor as source code. So for the binaries, it's really easy. You go and install Google Chrome. We have a binary. You can check the checksum and make sure that it's the same as what Google published. Easy. But on the source code side, it's not that easy. So I want to talk about kind of the supply chain of formula and open source packages and how you can verify them and add a higher degree of confidence to your workflows. When someone packages something in Homebrew as a source code-based formula, what's happening is we create a recipe, a formula, of how to build the binary. Then we build the binary, and then we install the binary on the device. Who builds the binary is an interesting question. In the early days of Homebrew, you used to build the binaries yourself. You would say brew install Python, brew install OpenSSL. It would fetch the source code, build the binary on your machine, and then install it. The problem with that is it's slow. You have to wait for every single thing to compile. So over time, Homebrew created this thing called bottles, where Homebrew will build those binaries for you, and then you could download the binaries pre-compiled. So now you have to see, like, there's a few places where there could be injected vulnerabilities. There's the source code from the upstream provider, then there's the build environment from Homebrew, then there's the binary, and then it gets put onto your machine. How can you verify that all of that is safe and secure? That's where attestations come in. So every package in Homebrew is built using Homebrew's build environment. That build environment is using GitHub Actions, and GitHub has this interesting feature where they'll sign packages built on GitHub Actions. So for every package in Homebrew, you can actually find a cryptographic signature that proves that this package was built at this date and time on this GitHub Actions runner using this source code that was pulled from GitHub at this location. And we have a feature in Homebrew where you can actually turn this on, it's on by default, to verify that this is true, so that you know the software you're installing on the machine is verified. And then in Workbrew, you can actually set a policy that requires this to be true across your entire fleet. So I know that was kind of long-winded for the security side, but let's talk a bit about Workbrew's API. So everything that we do in the Workbrew console is meant to be available to you as something you could script, something that you could manage externally. And so we have APIs for a lot of different things. It looks something like this. This is an early stage of our API. You just have a list of your endpoints, and you have a token that you can get from the console, and I'll walk through a few of the valuable ones here. So devices. This is an inventory tool. You can get a list of every single device in your environment, including things like what's the description, what's the name of the device, when was it last seen, operating system information, how many packages are installed, all that kind of info. Up next is formula. So we talked about formula. It's a type of package. You can find all the information of which packages are in use in your fleet, in your workspace. So this is great for building something like an inventory that you need to go through an audit. Maybe you have some kind of third-party SIM that you want to send this data to on a regular basis. You can automate that as well. Same thing for Casks. So this is for desktop apps, binary packages. So this will tell you, for example, you have Google Chrome, you have Zoom, you have Slack installed on these devices. You have an API endpoint for vulnerabilities. This is really useful for doing things like automations around risk factors. We have a customer that uses this to automatically remove devices from their VPN when they have a vulnerability that's over a certain age. So you can see what's there and then automate it however you like. You can also take actions in Workbrew. So anything that you would want to do on these devices can be boiled down to a command. Brew install some package, brew upgrade some package, brew pin, brew tap. And so with this API endpoint, you can build tools into your workflows that automate management tasks in Workbrew. We've taken those APIs and built some additional tooling that can be used with something like GitHub Actions to do configuration as code. So what you can do is essentially create a Git repository. Inside that repository, you make a list of configuration files. Each configuration file corresponds to one device group. Within that device group, you can assign a number of packages, and then they'll be automatically installed. And so what this does, it makes it so that you as an IT professional, say you have a fleet of 1,000 devices, you introduce Workbrew. Now you're the single point of failure. Everybody comes to you and says, hey, I need X, I need Y. Instead, you can give that access back to the teams through a configuration as code mentality where you say, if you need something, make a pull request into this repository. When it's approved, it will be installed. And you can have different approval policies for different teams, so it makes it really, really easy to manage adding new things into the fleet. So we have an integration with Jamf. There's a bunch of information up on our website. I'll leave this up if you want to take a picture, but it's workbrew.com/workswithjamf. And this will walk you through installing Workbrew. You can install the free version with Jamf, get all that information, visibility information about what's going on in your fleet. I don't know why this is in here. And now we have some time for Q&A. Right here.
Oop, just a second.
Oh, wait, I think we're going to bring you a mic.
This will make it a little bit easier. There you go.
Thank you. There are two questions I have.
Sure.
The first one is on my Homebrew installation at the office and whatnot. I've got things set up so that when they're on-prem, we have specific proxy settings set for them, off-prem, other settings. Is that doable within your framework?
Mm-hmm. So you have different Homebrew settings depending on if they're on
proxy settings.
Proxy settings. Yes. Okay, so we do support proxies. The way that proxy support works is that it's configured at the macOS networking level. So if you configure the proxy correctly on the macOS networking level, we'll detect it and we'll use that. So if you have different proxy settings on those devices depending on their location, the code running on that device will detect it correctly.
Okay. And the second question is that you had mentioned earlier about permissions. Right now, on my setups, all my users have standard users. None of them are admins. And there are certain brew items where I have to elevate them temporarily so that things will run. A good example is PowerShell, for example. Mm-hmm. How do you handle things like that when a user is a standard user?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to take a little bit of extra time to explain this. So in Brew, you have Formula and Casks. Formula, as a standard user, you can install most Formula just fine. But as a standard user, installing Casks can be challenging because many Casks are installed using PKG files. Those PKG files will require admin privileges. So what we've done to get around that problem is made it so that you can create a list of predetermined allowed Casks. So Casks generally correspond to desktop applications. So you could say, for example, I want to make a list of these 50 Casks that anybody in my environment can install. And once you add those to Workbrew, any of those users, even though they're standard users, when they request to install those Casks, they will not need to elevate their privileges. So that's how we do that for those types of packages that require admin privileges. So our goal is that Workbrew gives the developer the exact same experience that they would have if they were to install Homebrew themselves, even if they don't have admin privileges. So there are a couple of cases where that's not entirely possible. So for example, if you don't go and predetermine that allowed list of packages, there's no real secure way that we could do that because effectively if you said, you could install a Cask that requires sudo, but you're not a sudo user, then you would basically be giving them arbitrary code execution, right? So we don't do that. But if you make a list of these are the packages they want to be able to install, they can essentially self-service install them via Brew. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Great. Other folks with questions? Yep, we got one in the middle.
I have a follow-up on the proxy question.
Sure.
Does that require the shell variables to be set for the proxy, or is it able to read it natively through what's set through the network stack in, say, system settings?
Okay, so the question is about whether or not I have to set the environment variables with the proxy settings. To be completely honest, I don't know that off the top of my head, but we did have some work done on this area so that you don't have to do it manually. There are two ways that these things can pick up the proxy settings. One is if it's pulled from the macOS network, and then the other is if it's pulled from these configuration variables, these environment variables in Homebrew. It may be the case that you would need to set the Homebrew stuff via our configuration one time, but all of the stuff that's inside the packages would be pulling it from the networking layer. But I'm not 100% sure, so if you want to find me after, I'll take a note and then I'll follow up with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We got a question in the front row.
Hey, so from a user's perspective, if they have Brew installed now, and then we install Workbrew on top of that, and they're installing software that's whitelisted, they'll know no difference, right?
It should be completely transparent, yeah, that's the idea. So once you install it on their device, the way we're able to do that is it really is just Homebrew. It's Homebrew with more stuff, right? So when we install Workbrew, we would install Homebrew on their device. If it's already there, we just use what's there, and then we add our layer on top that gives you the administration, visibility, and control. Just to talk a little bit about how that works, in the Homebrew project, there are a number of configuration options, there are a number of features that are built for third-party management that we've actually contributed to Homebrew. So if you go into Homebrew and read the documentation, you'll find that there are features for blocking packages now. And we contributed those back to Homebrew. Now, you would have to build your whole administrative tooling on how to manage those lists and how to get them onto the device and how to prevent them from being changed. So all of that's built into Homebrew, and it will be the exact same experience for them.
And if they try to install something that's not approved, do they just get
They would just get a message on the command line that says, this was forbidden by a policy in your Workbrew account, contact this person or go to this page or go to this Slack channel to get help.
Okay. And what about like pushing out updates? How is that pushed?
Pushing out auto updates?
Yeah, updates to any application.
Yeah, sure. So we have a couple different policies that you can configure in Workbrew. One of them is automatic updates policy, where you can specify what should be updated and at what frequency. So you can say, for example, for my standard or my default group, I want every package when it's vulnerable to automatically be patched. When a new version of any package is released, I want it to be automatically updated. But that might be too aggressive for some users. So for your developers, you might not want to do that. So you can create a different policy for each group where for your developers, if there's a vulnerability, it will patch the vulnerability. But if a new release happens, it will not automatically update them. And so you can configure that on a per group basis.
Is that pushed via like APNS? How is that done?
Is that pushed via what?
APNS?
That's all managed via the Workbrew console. So
Is there like a check-in period? Or?
yeah, there's a check-in period. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Right here, yeah.
So kind of following along to his question with that, sorry, come back to me. I had it in my head and I just lost it.
No worries. Other questions out there? Yeah, we got one in the back.
So you mentioned that you can install Workbrew on a computer that's already had just Homebrew on it out in the wild for some time. When you do that, are you able to see, you mentioned that you can see when things were installed, how many things were installed. You can see that after the fact?
Yes.
Okay. And then you mentioned that in the paid version or the full version, you can remove.
Yes.
Can you make the user aware? Is there a notification that you can say, hey, we removed this, or they just have to find it and be surprised that it's gone?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, we don't have any communication with the end user, so it's fully transparent. In the future, we expect to add some functionality where you'll be able to notify the user of the actions you're taking. You can still notify them out of band, so you know who they are, you know what their devices are. You could send them email, Slack, et cetera, to say, hey, we're going to make this change on your device, depending on what you need. With regard to the free plan versus the paid and what you can do to remove packages, the delineation between the free plan and the paid products is taking right actions, basically. So everything on the free plan is targeted at getting you installed, the easiest way to get Brew up and running, giving you visibility and setting the foundation of your deployment. And then the paid plans are things like setting up policies and rules and removals and things like that.
I don't think you mentioned pricing aside from that.
Yeah, pricing's on our website. Okay. It's $10 per device per month on the Pro plan, which is self-service. And then we have an enterprise plan that's custom pricing. Yep, thanks for coming by. Yep, he's ready up front.
I'll come back. We'll go.
Don't forget.
The coffee finally kicked in. All right, so along his note of where you brought up the thing of different groups, like you have developers and then the other teams, right, where
Yep.
maybe developers need a specific version and we don't want to update them. When it comes to installing the Workbrew app, is there some kind of like additional line field to auto scope them into a dev group versus another group?
Yeah, so we don't actually do the grouping on the device.
Okay.
The way the grouping works is it's all on the web interface.
Okay.
So if you want to put devices into a group, you could use our API. So if you have a data set you wanted to pull in, or you could use a connection with your MDM. So your MDM will have device groups. You could set them up there. A question I frequently get is, do we integrate with identity providers for groups? We don't directly integrate with identity providers, and the reason is that we need serial numbers of the devices because we don't have user accounts on the devices. And all of that's related to the idea of collecting the least amount of personal information possible. But what you can do, for example, let's say you use Entra. You integrate your Entra with Jamf or whatever MDM you're using. Those device groups will be set up in Jamf and they'll immediately show up in Workbrew. So assigning users to devices can be automated, or assigning groups to devices can be automated. However, you wouldn't do it on the device itself.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. There's another couple one in the middle.
So my question has to do with when you have multiple MDMs in your enterprise, can we use one instance of Workbrew, like one is talking to Entra Intune and one is talking to Jamf? Or do we need to separate those out?
That's a great question. So you don't need to use an MDM with Workbrew. So first of all, you can use Workbrew without an MDM entirely. We do have a one-to-one mapping of an MDM to a workspace. And in Workbrew, a workspace is the container that has all of your devices and everything in it. Now, I have customers who are very large companies with different sites, and they might have different Jamf instances at each site. And in those cases, what we recommend is to have one workspace per site. You integrate each workspace with each instance of your MDM, and then you can go from there. In the case of, maybe we have like Intune and Jamf or something, and it's one big thing, but you want to have them together. We don't have a way to integrate two MDMs at the same time. However, the MDM integration is two parts. One is for installation, which you can do with any MDM. It's just a PKG. And the other is for syncing device groups. So in the case of I have two sets of MDMs I want to sync from, that would be a feature request that we could look at, but we don't do that today.
Okay, and so if you have now multiple, you need multiple instances of a Workbrew. I guess we would have to just talk about enterprise.
Yeah, we can talk about it more, but what I will say is we have multi-tenancy, so you can have one user account that can manage multiple workspaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I saw there was another one back here somewhere.
Okay, this reminded me of two other questions.
Yep.
The first one, just to follow up on her. So, like in my case, I've got two instances of Jamf, a dev and a prod. Can they both be hooked up to the same scenario, or is that basically the two separate workspaces?
That would be two separate workspaces, yep.
Okay. And the second one is I have a group of users that the only way that I allow them to use Homebrew is to go through self-service. I change permissions and all that kind of stuff on the binaries and make sure they can't do anything otherwise. In Workbrew, would we basically do the same thing via an allowed list, for example, and do it that way, or is there a way to...
So if you wanted to make Brew available as self-service, the way to do that would be to create a self-service entry for Workbrew, and then anybody in your Jamf instance could install Workbrew via self-service. And if you wanted to limit that to certain people, you could, but once it's installed on their device, then everything within the Workbrew ecosystem would be controlled by the Workbrew console.
Okay, because like for this particular group, we don't allow them to use the command line tool at all, period. It's all done via...
Yeah, so if you had, for example, some scripts you needed to run to enable command line for them, you could put that into your self-service. So it would be first enable them as a command line user, then install Workbrew for them, and then they would have access to it. Does that make sense? Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, one last thing. This is my contact info. My name is John Britton. Feel free to send me an email. And if you don't mind, I would like to take a photo from up here. Actually, I'll do it this way. Ready? All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. If you fill this out, get this cheat sheet, I will get your contact info, and I will follow up with you. Thank you.